I think for the most part they are.
Okay.
But and again, we know lots of people who they're atheists, but they're also conspiracy theorists. They're atheists, but they're also, like, they believe in, any number of weird other New Agey kind of beliefs.
Yeah.
So it's one thing. I mean, really, atheism is not a worldview. Atheism is a position on just one question, and everything else is sort of open.
I called myself a skeptic well before I called myself an atheist publicly. There are a lot of skeptic agnostics out there, and some skeptic agnostics actually say that agnosticism is the only supportable methodology, is that there's no evidence, so you can't answer one way or the other.
But I think also they sometimes get confused on this scale, as if there's this three-part scale, and there's theism, atheism, and agnosticism in the middle. These things overlap. They're not mutually exclusive. Like, for instance, I'm an agnostic atheist. I take the same position on God that I take on leprechauns. I don't know with 100% certainty that no gods exist. However, I think it's so incredibly unlikely that I'm not going to take it as a serious position unless I get some evidence first. The same thing with leprechauns. I can't say that there are no leprechauns that are just evading our detection somewhere on the planet, and they're using their magical powers to hide from us.
Every time we have this conversation, we usually get an email saying, you guys are actually agnostics, and it's unfair for you to say that you're atheists. And we go over this time and time again, is that there are certain types of atheism, and they've got many people like Dawkins have suggested scales for atheism, and the difference between atheism and anti-theism. And there's essentially, for me, once again, I am an agnostic atheism. Is that agnostic atheist? I am not agnostic atheism. I'm just one guy. Is that I have no evidence for or against God, and I am operating under the assumption that without that evidence, God does not exist. I suppose that there are some people out there who sort of are agnostic theists, who say there are no, there's no evidence for or against God, so I'm going to believe in God.
Yeah.
Except they usually just pick one God and go with it, usually for cultural reasons.
Not even like a deistic one. But again, I've made this argument before. I make the argument that 99% of sane, honest people are agnostic, including theists.
Yeah.
Which means believers, when you really get down to it, they don't absolutely know. We do have one last call, and we can make it kind of quick. Cheryl from Seattle, how are you doing today?
Well, thank you. I was calling to respond to your mention of the skepticism, because I was raised agnostic in the 50s by my mother, who had witnessed World War II and said that she personally couldn't believe in a God, but it was up to me to find my own. And she personally owned a Bible and said every educated, should read the Bible, but people in church were not necessarily all better than people outside of church, and for me to make up my own mind. And I felt like I had to hide it. I'm 57 years old, and when I went to grade school, you had to list what faith you were to enter the school. And my father was in the military, so I was both in school in Germany and in school in the Northwest. And so I asked my mother how I should fill that in because I felt really uncomfortable being agnostic or atheist.
Yeah.
Everyone appeared to have a Christian God, and it was even mentioned like in the classroom, such as stories. Oh, you all know this story. Well, I didn't, so I was constantly feeling left out, and I felt like I had to hide it.
Yeah, that's
so my mother, I said, Mom, what do I put on this form? And she says, well, stick to Protestant. That's probably the least worst of them. And so I just remembered I was a P with a long word from then on.
That's a
But what I did, I also researched a lot of the church, and I married into a Catholic family. I tried to convert. I mean, I have really appreciated teachings of Buddhism on how life is short. There's suffering. There's way out of suffering. I found some good teachings with Buddhism, but I also learned about more about the long, bloody overthrow of women that the organized Catholic Church undertook for 1,000 years, and we only know the tip of the iceberg, the witch hunts. And it's the fear I had as a young girl. I do not feel there is as great a fear now. I think you can say openly you're agnostic or atheist. I don't know if you agree with me. That's my question.
Well, it's not dangerous, I don't think, anymore.
It's not as dangerous as it once was.
I mean, there's places in the world where if you announce you're agnostic or atheist, you could be killed for it. We don't, thankfully, we don't live in one of those places. One thing you said earlier, I think this is very true, talking about just this fear of outing yourself. I had that sort of fear, too, in my development.
I completely did, yeah.
And I never had the sort of crazy Christian upbringing that anyone else had. I also had that sort of very secular upbringing. But at the same time, the cultural stigma against those words was so great that it took a long time for me to accept that I really didn't believe that stuff. And when I did, I actually found it somewhat liberating.
Yeah.
When I finally said, you know what, I am an atheist.
I do live in Tacoma. I live in Pierce County, and we're near the Air Force and the Army base near there. And it is still difficult to be an atheist in the military.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah, I grew up on base until I was 9 years old, and then my dad retired in Tacoma, so that was exactly the culture.
Yeah, and I'm a member of Tacoma Atheists, and we occasionally get folks in from the base, and some of the stories here, eventually I'd like to put a show together about that. They get pretty bad.
Yeah.
So...
there has been a movement in the past couple decades by evangelical Christians to really start harassing people in the military. And it's kind of sad, but a lot of this has gone, it's soaked in to a really scary degree. I mean, things like the Air Force Academy being the most absurd and offensive examples of it.
There was that concert fiasco.
Yeah, where people were, they had to mandatorily go to a Christian rock concert by their commanding officer. That's the sort of stuff that really lawsuits are the sort of thing that sort of drag that stuff out. And again, this is why a separation of church and state is just so necessary. Because while we all have a right to religious freedom and expression, including the right to not believe, the government doesn't have that right. The government is an artificial entity that's supposed to represent all of us, which means it has to be neutral, not saying anything of support or condemnation of any religious belief.
Yeah. Cheryl, you have a great story. Thank you for sharing it, and thank you for your call.
Thank you kindly. Have a good day.
You too. Thank you.
That really amazing stories, and that's great. Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, it really is.
And that is an episode that I'd like to do sometime, if we can find people willing to speak, because it is very difficult to be in the military and to be an atheist. And that's I think it's something that light needs to be shed on.
And that's something a lot of religions have done forever, is just trying to equate patriotism with religious belief. You know, God bless America. They try to
one nation under God.
They try to equate that. I mean, the one nation under God. The insertion of that into the pledge was the lobbying effort of religious groups.
Yeah.
In the 1950s, and the same thing with you know, in God we trust on currency. That was religious groups lobbying. A lot of people have this false belief that this stuff has been there since the creation of this country. That is not true.
They
sort of devised their own history.
And it was one blogger that I read, Slacktivist, Fred Clark, said that there are Christian dominionists out there. They want to run the country, and they want it to be a Christian country. So they want to make the government sectarian. Okay, you can't all be right.
Yeah.
Which sect?
See, that's what happens.
Who loses? Who wins?
That's the thing about people don't seem to realize about the religious right, is that it's not this big monolithic group with like a pope or something.
Yeah.
This is a coalition of thousands of little denominations, and and the thing is that once they do get power, they are going to start eating their own. If they win. And you start to see that in things like when Mitt Romney ran for president, and all these evangelical preachers started saying a vote for Mitt Romney is a vote for Satan.
And now all the government actually has to take stances on religious doctrinal concepts, where as a sectarian or as a secular country, they don't.
It's not our place. It's not our responsibility.
Another episode that we're going to be doing is we touched on the Church of Satan and Satanism a little bit. We're also actually going to be doing a whole episode on Satanism, the Church of Satan, and specifically the 1980 Satanic Panic.
Yes, things like Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah.
And a more recent example, things like the Harry Potter books, where people were talking about that. There's also videos of preachers screaming about how Pokemon is demons.
And Harry Potter, and it moves on, is that movement is still there. And it's especially interesting right now with Christine O'Donnell.
Yeah, I really like to think of this movement as the war on fun. That there's this real movement that a lot of fundamentalists have, where they want to basically they think of anything that's fun that doesn't involve Jesus
Yeah.
as a rival or as a competitor for attention.
Well, if you want to battle against the war on fun with us this evening, we will be at Azteca at Northgate at 4:30 p.m. We are going to be there to have fun and to, I don't know, I didn't bring my dice bag, so we can't play D&D, but I will be having a drink and talking about stuff like this and probably dressed like this, and so fighting the battle for fun.
But at the same time, we were happy to debate with anyone who disagrees with us. However, we're not looking for a fight.
Yeah.
So if you're coming to spit at us or scream at us, you can probably skip coming to Azteca. But we're happy to have conversation and debate.
Yeah,
Always happy.
I like a contentious debate. I don't like a violent debate.
No.
Yeah.
If anything, violence is the admission you have a losing argument.
Right.
What it really comes down to is like, I got nothing.
Well, once again, thank you for watching us. Thank you for listening. If you would like to email us, you can visit our website at askanatheist.tv. If you would like to leave us a voicemail, you can call us at 206-420-0997 and leave us a voicemail. We may edit it when we air it on television if we can. And wow, this actually went a lot better than I thought it would.
Yeah.
This is kind of emergency show. Break glass, remove emails. And I think it worked pretty good.
All right.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you. See you next Sunday at
See you
Ask an
next Sunday.
Atheist.